So let's start. Let's start with some background of best value procurement. First of all, I think it's important to understand that best value procurement is not a Dutch invention, but actually it originated from the United States. There is Professor Dean Kashiwagi. He's basically the founder and the thought leader in the field of best value procurement. He's working for the Arizona State University, and he's been working with best value procurement these last 15 years. And his tagline is basically no direction, management or control. And there is a nice story to tell about it. He has a Japanese background, and he has a lot of children. He has 8 children, and his first children he raised in as he says, in his Japanese culture, which is a little bit about working hard, follow the rules, do what your parents tell you to do, be obedient. And at a certain point of time, he discovered, like, okay, well, maybe it does not bring out the best in my children. And he switched, as he called it, to a no rules regime. So he abandoned all his rules that he put on his children. He left them total freedom, so his children could eat as much candy as they wanted, they could study when they wanted, and all the father did was to provide them coaching and facilitation, but did not tell them what to do anymore. And, well, his story is that he discovered at that point of time that his children started to act after a time in a more responsible way, in a more accountable way. They started to take initiative, and they started to develop actually better than his younger children that raised more in the rules culture. So, and that's the parallel basically that he also draws to business relationships, between customers and vendors. Vendors should be allowed to operate in their sweet spot and should operate with as limited boundaries and limitations as possible, because then actually they can really be an expert and do the things in the right way. And that's what he also carried over to procurement. And as I said, he's been developing it already for some time, but around 2009, it was launched in the Netherlands in a large infrastructure project at Rijkswaterstaat, the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure. And that was quite a successful project, rightly also seen as the launching project. And after that, it has been spread out not only to civil infrastructure projects, but also to other fields, other domains, also to IT procurement, although that is quite recently, I must say, and is for most also done in the Netherlands. Because if you look in the Netherlands, what the current status is, you could say that in 2014 has been quite important, because there is quite a large number of IT sourcing procurement projects that have been carried out following best value procurement. It's the diagram to the right. Around 70 projects have been carried out that way. Especially in the public sector, that must be said, because in the public sector in Holland or in Europe, we are tied to the European tendering legislation, which puts quite strong demands on the process of tendering. And we also have a tradition of being very detailed in doing the tender, making a lot of specification, creating a lot of paperwork. And best value procurement provides an alternative for that, especially in the public sector. People are quite eager and are quite happy to embrace best value procurement, because it frees them from all the paperwork. Also, the study that has been done last year, that's more for the Dutchies, the Commissie Elias, there has been carried out a study into the question why so many IT projects are failing in the public sector in the Netherlands. And one of the answers was, well, it's also because we have a strange tendering mechanism where many times the customer thinks he knows the best and prescribes to the vendor on how he should carry out his tasks. And that often leads to vendors that become very reactive and do not take initiative anymore. And then when the project is failing, the vendor can say, well, it was the customer that ordered it this way. So that has also been a driver behind best value procurement. So let's now briefly look into what best value procurement actually entails. This sheet gives you the 3 pillars of best value procurement, you could say. It's about utilizing expertise. Expertise is put very central in best value procurement. It has the fundamental belief that if you select a supplier with the right expertise, that supplier is able to look into the future and to predict the risks that you will encounter in the project or in the sourcing. So your selection project, your selection process should be focused on selecting the right expertise. No management, that's already what I basically already said. Traditional management and traditional procurement is many times about influencing and trying to steer the vendor. Best value procurement is far more about, well, give the vendor the freedom to do actually what he's good at, so he can do the right thing for you. And be very hesitant with putting on all kinds of detailed specifications. So all the requirements, specifications that we are used to carry over in a request for proposal, just throw them away and try to limit the number of paperwork and focus on your objectives. I will come to that later, but focus on your objectives is very important. And the third one I want to briefly explain is the concept of transparency. Sometimes best value procurement is also connected to trust, like you should trust your vendor. Well, there's some truth in that, but as Dean Kashiwaki likes to tell, it's not about trust, it's about transparency, it's about proof, it's about evidence, and that especially comes forward in the importance of metrics. You should always ask your vendor for proof, for evidence on the basis of metrics. So he should always be able to show, well, how many projects he carried out with what kind of success rate and how many of those projects were within time, within budget, etc. And don't believe it just on vague statements, but try to make it everything very concrete. So these 3 concepts are integrated into the procurement process, because at the end, best value procurement is a procurement approach and also a governance approach, but it is actually very pre-described in steps for the procurement approach. And the way I always like to show it is with this picture, where you can see 3 different ways of doing procurements, and best value procurement is on the right-hand side. And best value procurement really much focuses on the why question. You have to focus on your objectives. So actually what you deliver in your request for proposal is a good description of the objectives that you want to achieve with your sourcing. And the solution is up to the provider. That's one way, but other ways are the other 2 ways of sourcing, of procurement, to the left, is focus on the how and focus on the what. And that's basically the more traditional approach what we are used to. Best value procurement has the big advantage that it is relatively simple. You don't need to carry over a lot of paperwork. You give your suppliers quite a lot of freedom to come up with their own solutions. And you can really also select the vendor on the added value that they provide to your organization, in contrary to the other mechanisms where far more the price, the actual costs of the vendor will be the most dominant selection criteria. So it's a little bit about also if you want to cross a road, or you have a road and there are cars and people need to cross it. You can describe that issue, and vendors can come up with a bridge or with a tunnel, but it's basically left up to them on what kind of solution is the most feasible for achieving your objectives. This is how the actually selection process is looking like, existing out of a number of phases, and especially the selection in the middle is very much pre-described on how to do that in best value procurement. It has a number of ingredients, you could say, number of filters that you should use in the selection process, and that basically bring out the expertise, look at the expertise that the vendor has in relationship to the objectives you want to achieve with the sourcing. It's about the level of expertise, the risk assessment, the value added proposals, and also the interviews and the price. These are 5 ingredients that best value procurement looks at and make you able to down select to only one vendor. And with this single vendor, you enter the clarification phase, as it is called. The clarification phase is very important because there you, with only one vendor, will discuss his proposal and his solution for the sourcing or for the project. So only then, with one single vendor, you will look into the box of his solution and discuss what's in there and see if it really fits you. Before that, in the selection process, you only looked at the expertise and his assessment of the risks and what he's going to do about the risks, about his value-added proposals, and his commitment, you could say, to make the project to a success. Also important so in the selection process are the interviews, because also best value procurement has the fundamental belief that expertise is very much into the people that are carrying out the job. So you should always also have interviews with the actually key players that will actually do the work in the future. So this process is allowing you to quite rapidly do the selection with the filters and then go into depth with one single vendor. And if that vendor cannot live up to his promises, then there's always a way to go back to the number 2 that you selected and enter the clarification phase with the number 2 vendor. So maybe also what's important to say is that the amount of paperwork, especially for these documents that are required, level of expertise, risk assessment, is very limited. The vendor should be able to put it on 2 pages per proposal. So 2 pages for the risk assessment, 2 pages for the value added proposals, 2 pages for his to show his level of expertise. So he's also forced to be very to the point and to only put the right things in his document and not to have a copy and paste of previous bits that he made with all kinds of fancy text. So that's a little bit the theory, but of course the proof of the pudding is what's the actually experience and how does it actually work in real life. And well, actually we must say that there's not that many projects that have been carried out with best value procurement that really can look back from after the execution phase. Yeah, because of course the real proof of the pudding is in the execution. How successful is the project here in Holland? But the projects that have been carried out using best value procurement, they are quite happy about the way the selection was happening. The customers that I talked to and where we also carried out best value procurement, they're happy because there is quite a simple and a clear process. It does not entail a lot of paperwork anymore and a lot of descriptions. We don't have to also as Quint make thick documents with all kinds of requirement specifications. What organizations also like is the possibility to really interact with one vendor in that clarification phase and to really discuss the solution with that vendor. And what is very attractive is the focus on the value and risk minimization and accountability that the vendor needs to take to make the project a success. So there's quite a lot of benefits associated with best value procurement. At the same time, we should also be realistic and admit that it's not the solution for everything, and that there's also certain risks involved with best value procurement and some drawbacks. Well, a number of these are listed here, and one very obvious one, I think, is the first one, that there's always a danger that as a customer you have a very clear and outspoken picture of what you want to purchase. And by only stating your objectives, this might not be really bringing that desired good to the foreground. So, for example, in the example of the bridge, maybe you have a picture of a bridge to cross the road, and a supplier comes with an alternative like a helicopter service, and that might not be really what you had in mind, being a customer. So if you have an outspoken idea as a customer of what you want to purchase, and if you have all kinds of specification already laying there, maybe you should use them. Only when you really want the vendor to come up with a solution, then best value procurement is a good alternative. And another risk that we see coming up, especially this last half year, is that also best value procurement is becoming a little bit a trick for vendors. There's quite a lot of also best value experts, as they are called in the field, and also the vendors, they hire the best value experts to support them with creating the bid. Because they also understand that just putting the right things in your risk assessment, putting the right things in your value add proposal might help you to win the bid. And it's also a little bit a matter of how you phrase it and how you make the dominant matrix, as it is called, how you bring it in your proposal. So vendors are getting skilled in that. And of course, then there's this question, well, what do you select? Do you select the best vendor, or do you select the vendor that has the best knowledge in the field of best value procurement? Obviously, you want to select the best vendor for the job, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. And we also think that it does not do harm to also dare to differentiate a little bit from the default recipe, and also take a little bit different approaches, also to keep on challenging the vendors in coming up with original proposals, and not a copy and paste from previous proposals or what the best value experts tell them to write. So all in all, there are certain risks involved. There is more to talk about, but that goes too far for this webinar. But still, we think that best value procurement is here to stay. Is a very viable alternative, but is going to be here to stay in coexistence with other ways of doing tenders. So also the more traditional approach will be used in the future. We think, of course, also the way where you very functional make a description of the project, the sourcing, that will maintain to exist. But these ways of sourcing will be used in parallel. And what we can do is also help organizations to choose the right roadmap to perform a sourcing. And here's a picture that also helps organizations to understand, well, is this project, is this project or is this sourcing, is this suited to be procured with best value procurement? Because then you should look at the characteristics of the project, of the source services, of the supplier market, and foremost also the client organization, because also with best value procurement, the client organization should really be willing to carry over responsibilities to the vendor. So that's also what we as Quint can have as an added value. We, as Quint, of course, we're skilled in sourcing. That's, well, needless to say, that's our primary field of knowledge, sourcing of IT. But we also know a lot about selection processes like best value procurement. We don't see it as the only alternative, but we see it as a good alternative. We can help organizations in carrying out selection processes, but we can also help organizations in adjusting the best value approach to fit the project. We have different services also in this field. We have trainings. We can provide either an awareness workshop of a few hours to make a client organization aware of what kind of types of processes there are to procure a service, including best value procurement. We can provide a one-day training for a procurement team, for example, at the customer to carry over the basic philosophy of best value procurement and the approach. Or we can also carry over in a two-day training really the whole recipe and the steps in the best value procurement process. We have been doing this in the Netherlands this last year a number of times, and we have also been training vendors in developing vendors in best value procurement process. We actually don't help vendors in concrete procurement bids, because we do not like to be on that side of the table. We would like to be at the table, at the side of the table of the customer. But we do provide general best value procurement training to vendors as long as it is not associated to a concrete bid. So that's what we offer, and of course we do the consultancy, as I said, guidance on when to choose best value procurement and how to make best value procurement work for your organization. Well, that basically concludes what I would like to tell in a very short time frame. Takeaways, well, best value procurement is here to stay. But in order to make it work for the sourcing of IT, we see that some variations will develop and it needs some adoptions to the original approach. We can help customers with that. And being a thought leader in the field of sourcing, IT sourcing and best value procurement, I think we are the best organization in all modesty to help our customers in this field.